The industrial dishwasher behind me hissed and churned, a rhythmic soundtrack to my aching feet. I'd been on shift at Rossetti's for 11 hours straight, covering for Maria, whose daughter had the flu again. My lower back throbbed with each step as I wiped down the last table in my section, the lemony disinfectant smell mixing with garlic and basil that had saturated my hair hours ago. "Mia, table 6 needs their check," Tony called from the bar, not looking up from the martini he was shaking. The sound of ice against steel was sharp, cutting through the dinner rush noise that had finally started to fade. I nodded, sliding the check folder across the worn vinyl booth to a couple who barely noticed me. They never did. After 5 years serving tables, I'd perfected the art of being functionally invisible, present enough to keep glasses filled, invisible enough not to intrude on conversations. It was a survival skill in a restaurant, where tips made the difference between making rent and sleeping in my car. The November wind cut through my thin jacket as I finally stepped out the back entrance at midnight. Chicago winters had a way of finding every gap in cheap fabric, every weak seam. I pulled my coat tighter, the same gesture I'd made 1,000 times, and nearly collided with the small figure standing in the alley. "Sorry, The words died in my throat. A little girl stood there, maybe 8 years old, wearing a wool coat far too expensive for this neighborhood. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat braid, and her eyes, wide and unfocused, didn't quite meet mine. In her small hands, she clutched a white cane. "Are you Mia?" Her voice was soft but certain. My heart stuttered. "How do you know my name?" I heard the man inside say it, through the window. She gestured vaguely toward Rossetti's. "I've been waiting for you to finish your shift." I counted the cars leaving, and when the sounds got quieter, I knew it must be almost time. I glanced around the empty alley, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. "Sweetheart, where are your parents? You shouldn't be out here alone." "I'm not supposed to be out at all," she admitted, and I caught the edge of defiance in her tone. "But I needed to find you. I need your help." The cold forgotten, I knelt down to her level, careful not to startle her. "What kind of help?" "I want to learn to cook." Her chin lifted, determined despite the tremor I heard beneath the words. "Real cooking. Not just stirring things in bowls while someone else does everything important. I want to actually make something myself." The request was so unexpected, so specific, that I found myself answering before thinking. "Why me?" "Because you work in a restaurant, so you know how to cook. And because..." She paused, her fingers tightening on the cane. "Because you're nice. I've heard you through the window sometimes, when I sit on the bench across the street. You never sound angry like the others. You don't yell." A dozen questions crowded my mind, but the most pressing won out. "Does anyone know you're here?" Her silence was answer enough. "Okay," I said slowly, my waitress training kicking in. Assess the situation, solve the immediate problem, worry about consequences later. "Let's get you home. Where do you live?" 3 blocks from here, the brownstone with the black gate." She said it like everyone should know which one. "But I can't go back yet, not until you promise." "Promise what?" "That you'll teach me to cook, that you'll show me how to do it myself." Her unfocused eyes seemed to look right through me. "Please. I want to make something for my father's birthday. He's turning 35 next month, and I've never been able to give him anything I made myself. He won't let me near the kitchen because he's afraid I'll get hurt." The vulnerability in her voice cracked something in my chest. I thought of my own father, gone 5 years now, and the last birthday cake I'd made him. Lopsided chocolate with too sweet frosting that he'd proclaimed the best thing he'd ever tasted. "What's your name?" I asked gently. "Sophia." "Well, Sophia, I think we need to get you home first. Then maybe we can talk to your father about..." "No!" The word came out sharp, panicked. "He'll say no. He always says no. He thinks I'm made of glass. Her small hands clenched into fists. Everyone treats me like I'm going to break. But I'm not stupid just because I can't see. I can feel textures. I can smell when something's burning. I can hear when water boils. I know I can do this if someone just gives me a chance. I recognize that frustration, that desperate need to prove capability. I'd felt it every time someone at the restaurant assumed I couldn't handle the heavy trays because I was small. Every time a customer spoke to me slowly as if waitressing meant stupidity. I believe you, I said, and meant it. But Sophia, your father must be worried sick. You have to go home. Will you come with me? The question was small, almost pleading. Will you explain to him that I can learn? That I'm not helpless? I should have said no. Should have called the police, or walked her to her door and left. But something in Sophia's determination, in her fierce independence despite the world trying to convince her she needed protection, reminded me too much of myself at that age. All right, I agreed. I'll walk you home. The brownstone she led me to wasn't just expensive, it was a fortress. The black iron gate she'd mentioned was flanked by security cameras, and even from the street, I could see the warm glow of chandeliers through floor-to-ceiling windows. This wasn't a family home. This was a statement of power. Sophia? A man's voice cut through the night before we even reached the gate, sharp with panic and relief and fury all tangled together. Sophia, where the hell have you been? He appeared from the shadows of the front steps, and I felt my breath catch. Tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, the collar open, and even in the dim streetlight, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the controlled violence in the way he moved. This was not a man accustomed to fear. But right now, looking at his daughter, he was terrified. Papa, I'm fine, Sophia said, her voice steady. I went to find someone who can help me. His eyes, gray, cold as a Chicago winter, finally landed on me. I felt the weight of his assessment, the calculation happening behind that stare. I'd been sized up by customers before, reduced to my utility. But this was different. This was the gaze of someone deciding whether I was a threat or simply irrelevant. And you are? The question was a demand. Mia Chen. I kept my voice level, professional, the same tone I used with difficult customers. I work at Rosetti's. Sophia found me after my shift. Found you. He repeated the words like they tasted bitter. My daughter, who is 8 years old and blind, somehow made it 3 blocks through Chicago at midnight to find a stranger at a restaurant. The accusation was clear. This was somehow my fault. I didn't ask her to come, I said, fighting to keep defensiveness out of my voice. She was waiting in the alley when I left work. I was bringing her home. Papa, don't be angry at her, Sophia interjected, moving toward the sound of his voice with practiced ease. I went to find her because I need her help. She works with food every day. She knows how to cook. His jaw tightened. We have a chef, Sophia. If you want to learn to cook, I don't want to watch someone cook for me. Sophia cut in, and I heard the frustration I'd heard in the alley, amplified now. I want to learn how to do it myself. I want to make you something for your birthday. Something I made with my own hands. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or pain quickly masked. He looked at me again, and this time the calculation was different. You told her you'd teach her. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I told her we'd need to talk to you first. Smart. His tone was dry, almost mocking. Most people don't think to get parental permission before agreeing to spend time alone with a child. The implication stung, but I held his gaze. I'm not most people. A ghost of something, amusement, respect. flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold authority. Sophia, inside. Now. Anna's been losing her mind. But Papa, now, Sophia. The command in his voice left no room for argument. Sophia's shoulders slumped in defeat, but she turned toward me, her unseeing eyes somehow finding my direction. Thank you for walking me home, Mia. Any time, sweetheart. As Sophia made her way up the steps with her cane, tapping out a familiar rhythm, the man, her father, whose name I still didn't know, remained on the sidewalk, a wall between me and any escape. You didn't ask my name, he observed. You didn't offer it. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. Alaric Marchetti. The name meant nothing to me beyond what I could see. Wealth. Power. The kind of man who expected obedience and got it. Nice to meet you, Mr. Marchetti. Alaric, he corrected. Mr. Marchetti was my father. He paused, studying me with that same intense focus. Sophia doesn't make friends easily, doesn't trust strangers. I'm not trying to be her friend, I said honestly. She asked for help learning to cook, that's all. And you just happened to agree to teach a blind 8-year-old girl you'd never met before. I agreed to talk to her father about it, I corrected. There's a difference. He was quiet for a long moment, and I could feel him weighing something, calculating odds I couldn't see. Finally, tomorrow, 11 a.m. Bring your ID and a list of references. If you pass the background check, we'll discuss the possibility of you teaching Sophia some basic cooking skills, under supervision. The casual mention of a background check should have worried me, but instead, I felt a strange relief. This man took his daughter's safety seriously. In a city like Chicago, in a neighborhood like this, that mattered. I work tomorrow, I said. Night shift, but I'm free until 4 p.m. 11 a.m. then. He pulled a card from his pocket, extending it toward me. In the streetlight, I could see embossed lettering, an address. Don't be late. I took the card, our fingers not quite touching. I'm never late. We'll see. He turned and walked up the steps to his fortress, the door closing behind him with a solid click that sounded like finality. I stood there for a moment, the business card heavy in my hand, before my exhausted brain caught up with what had just happened. I'd agreed to come back tomorrow, to this house, to this man who watched me like I was a puzzle to solve or a problem to eliminate, to teach his daughter something he'd explicitly forbidden. The smart thing would be to throw away the card, to forget this night had ever happened. But as I walked the 3 blocks back to my studio apartment, I kept thinking about Sophia's voice, the determination underneath the plea, the fierce independence fighting against a world that saw her disability before it saw her. I knew that fight, had lived it every day since my father's death, left me scrambling to survive in a city that ground down anyone who showed weakness. Tomorrow, I would go back. Not because Alaric Marchetti had commanded it, but because Sophia had asked. And somewhere in the tangle of my exhaustion and empathy, I recognized the danger in that distinction. The card sat on my nightstand as I tried to sleep, the embossed address catching the streetlight through my window. I didn't know then that 11 a.m. tomorrow would change everything. That teaching a little girl to make cookies would unravel my carefully ordered life and tangle it with a man whose world I couldn't even begin to understand. But somewhere, in the part of me that had always believed in helping when I could, that had never learned to ignore someone asking for a chance, I already knew I would show up. I just didn't know what I was walking into. I arrived at the Marchetti brownstone at 10:55 a.m., my hands clenched around the folder containing everything Alaric had demanded. My driver's license, 3 professional references from Rossetti's, my food handler's certification that I'd earned 2 years ago, when I'd briefly dreamed of something beyond waiting tables. The morning light made the building look even more imposing than it had at midnight. Red brick perfectly maintained, windows gleaming, the black iron gate now clearly visible as part of a comprehensive security system. I pressed the intercom button, my pulse quickening despite my determination to appear calm. Name. The voice was male, clipped, not Alaric. Mia Chen. I have an 11 o'clock appointment. The gate clicked open without further comment. I walked up the stone path, noting the precision of the landscaping even in late November. Boxwoods trimmed to geometric perfection. The last hardy mums still blooming in shades of burgundy and gold. Money wasn't just visible here. It was stated in every deliberate detail. The front door opened before I could knock. A woman in her 50s stood there. Her gray-streaked hair pulled back severely, her expression neutral but assessing. She wore a simple black dress and sensible shoes. Staff, I recognized, not family. Miss Chen, I'm Anna, the housekeeper. Mr. Marchetti is expecting you in his study. Her accent was Eastern European, her English precise. Follow me, please. The interior matched the exterior's promise of wealth. Hardwood floors polished to a mirror shine, crown molding that had to be original to the building, artwork on the walls that looked expensive even to my untrained eye. But there was something missing. The house felt more like a museum than a home. No toys scattered in corners, no finger smudges on windows, no signs of the chaos that usually accompanied an 8-year-old. Anna led me down a hallway to a closed door, knocked twice, then opened it without waiting for response. Miss Chen, sir. Thank you, Anna. Alaric's voice came from behind a massive desk positioned in front of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Please ask Sophia to wait in the kitchen. I'll call for her shortly. I stepped inside, hearing the door close softly behind me. The study was all dark wood and leather, the scent of old books mixing with something else, bergamot and cedar, expensive cologne that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Alaric sat behind the desk, wearing another white shirt with the top buttons undone, his hair neatly styled now, every inch the successful businessman. Except business's men didn't usually have that particular alertness in their eyes, that constant awareness of angles and threats. Punctual, he observed, glancing at his watch. 5 minutes early. Sit. I took the leather chair across from him, setting my folder on the desk. Everything you asked for. He opened it without comment, methodically examining each document. I watched his eyes move across my driver's license, lingering on my address in a way that made heat creep up my neck. The neighborhood where I lived wasn't dangerous exactly, but it was far from safe. The kind of place where you learn to walk quickly at night and never make eye contact. Rossetti's, he said, reading one of my references. How long have you worked there? 5 years. Started as a hostess, worked up to server. Worked up. He repeated the phrase neutrally. And before that? College for 2 years. Art history major. I saw no point in hiding what the background check would reveal. My father died halfway through sophomore year. No life insurance, medical bills. I left school to work full-time. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted microscopically. Family? Just me now. My mother passed when I was 12. He set down the papers, folding his hands on the desk. The background check will take 48 hours. If it comes back clean, and if today's trial goes well, we can discuss an arrangement. Trial? Sophia is in the kitchen, waiting to make cookies with you. His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. I'll be observing. If I determine at any point that she's in danger, we're done. Understood? I met his gaze steadily. I'm not going to hurt your daughter, Mr. Marchetti. Alaric, he corrected again. And intent isn't the only way children get hurt. Carelessness, distraction, simple incompetence. Those are just as dangerous. The assessment stung, but I understood it. If Sophia were my daughter, I'd be protective too. More than protective. Fierce. I understand, I said instead of arguing. He stood, and I realized again how tall he was, how he seemed to command space without effort. The kitchen is this way. I followed him through the house, noting details with the observational skills I'd developed waiting tables. The alarm panel by the door, currently showing green, but sophisticated enough for a small bank. The way certain floorboards didn't creak, despite the building's age, recently reinforced, probably soundproofed. The discreet cameras in corners, small enough to miss if you weren't looking. This wasn't just a wealthy home. This was a secured facility disguised as a residence. The kitchen was enormous, professional-grade appliances gleaming under warm pendant lights. Sophia sat at a large marble island, her hands folded in her lap, her white cane propped against her chair. She turned her head toward the sound of our footsteps, her face brightening. "Mia, you came." "Of course I did," I said, moving to stand beside her. "I promised, didn't I?" Alaric took a position leaning against the far counter, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Watching, always watching. "What are we making?" Sophia asked, her fingers drumming excitedly on the marble. "Well, you said you wanted to make cookies. What kind is your father like?" "Chocolate chip," Sophia answered immediately. "But he never eats them because he says they're too sweet." "Then we'll make them less sweet," I said, my mind already adjusting the recipe I'd been mentally composing since last night. "And we'll add a little sea salt to balance the sugar. Does that sound good?" Sophia nodded enthusiastically. I glanced at Alaric, saw him watching us with that same intense focus, and decided to ignore him. This was about Sophia, not his judgment. "Okay, first rule of cooking," I began, pulling ingredients from the bags I'd brought. I wasn't going to assume this kitchen would be stocked for baking. "We work by feel and smell as much as sight, so before we do anything else, I want you to smell each ingredient and tell me what you notice." I opened the vanilla extract, holding the bottle near Sophia's nose. Her eyes closed in concentration. "It smells sweet. Like the perfume Anna wears sometimes." "Exactly. Vanilla is sweet, but it's also warm, complex." I moved to the butter. "Now this one. Creamy? Rich." Sophia's nose wrinkled slightly. "A little sour?" "Good catch. Butter has a slight tang to it. That sourness means it's real butter, not margarine." I continued through each ingredient: flour, sugar, chocolate chips, salt, letting her build a sensory map of what we'd be working with. From the corner of my eye, I could see Alaric's posture had relaxed fractionally. He was still watching, but the rigid tension had eased. "Now," I said, "we're going to measure everything together. I'm going to guide your hands, show you what a cup of flour feels like in weight, how to level it off. Ready?" What followed was slow, methodical work. I stood behind Sophia, my hands over hers, guiding her through each step. Measuring flour by feel, learning the resistance of cold butter against a wooden spoon, the way sugar crystals felt different from salt granules. She was a quick study, her other senses compensating beautifully for her lack of sight. "The dough should feel like this," I explained, helping her hands work the mixture. "Smooth but not sticky. Can you feel how it's coming together?" "Yes." Sophia's smile was radiant. "I can feel it changing, getting softer." "That's the butter warming up from the heat of our hands." "That's exactly right." We shaped the cookies together, my hands guiding hers to form even balls, to press them slightly flat, to space them properly on the baking sheet. Alaric had moved closer now, watching Sophia's face more than our hands, and I caught something in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or something more tender that he quickly masked. "Now comes the most important part," I said. "When we put these in the oven, the kitchen is going to fill with a specific smell. I want you to remember it, because that's how you'll know when cookies are almost done. Not by a timer, but by the scent." "What will it smell like?" Sophia asked. "Like butter caramelizing, like chocolate just starting to melt." like vanilla getting toasted. I slid the tray into the oven Anna had preheated. We'll wait together, and I'll tell you when you start to smell it. As the cookies baked, Sophia and I cleaned up together, and I taught her to identify when dishes were truly clean by running her fingers along the edges, feeling for residue. Alaric remained silent, but his presence was a constant pressure in the room. "There," I said as the scent began to change, becoming richer, more complex. "Do you smell that?" Sophia inhaled deeply. "Yes, it smells. Warm. Sweet, but not too sweet." "That's perfect. Another minute and they'll be ready." When I pulled the tray from the oven, the cookies were golden brown, the chocolate chips just melted, the edges crispy and the centers soft. Textbook perfect. I set them on the cooling rack and broke one in half, checking the texture before handing a piece to Sophia. "Careful, it's still hot. Blow on it first." Sophia did, then took a tentative bite. Her expression transformed, pure joy mixed with pride. "I made this," she whispered. "I really made this." "You did," I confirmed. "Every single step." "Papa, you have to try one." Sophia turned toward where Alaric stood. "You have to taste what I made." He approached slowly, and I saw something I hadn't expected in his expression. Uncertainty, as if he didn't quite know how to navigate this moment. He took the cookie Sophia offered, their fingers brushing, and took a bite. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. "It's perfect, Sophia," he said finally, and his voice was rougher than before. "Better than any cookie I've ever had." "Really?" Sophia's smile could have lit the entire city. "Really?" He looked at me over his daughter's head, and the assessment in his eyes had changed. I couldn't quite read it, but it wasn't hostility anymore. It was something more complicated. "Miss Chen," he said, "Anna will show you out. We'll be in touch when the background check clears." It was a dismissal, but not a rejection. I gathered my things, said goodbye to Sophia, who made me promise to come back, and followed Anna to the front door. "You were good with her," Anna said quietly as she opened the door. "Not many people are patient enough. They treat her like she's fragile." "She's not fragile," I replied. "She's strong. She just needs someone to see that." Anna's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, I think perhaps Mr. Marchetti is beginning to understand this too." I walked back to the bus stop, the morning's events replaying in my mind. I'd expected suspicion, maybe outright hostility. What I hadn't expected was the glimpse I'd seen of Alaric Marchetti as a father, protective to the point of paranoia, but underneath that, desperately wanting his daughter to be happy. My phone buzzed as I waited for the bus. Unknown number. "This is Alaric Marchetti. The background check has been expedited. You're cleared. Same time tomorrow. We'll discuss compensation and scheduling." I stared at the text. Expedited meant he'd had someone working on it while we made cookies. Meant he'd already decided before I'd even left his house. "Thank you," I typed back. "I'll be there." The response came immediately. "Don't thank me. You're doing this for Sophia, not for me." He was right. But as the bus carried me back to my neighborhood, back to my studio apartment where the heat barely worked and the neighbors fought through paper-thin walls, I couldn't stop thinking about the man who'd watched his daughter make cookies with such carefully controlled emotion. Alaric Marchetti was dangerous. That much was obvious in every calculated movement, every assessing glance. But he was also a father who loved his daughter enough to let a stranger teach her something he feared would hurt her. I didn't know which truth would matter more. Didn't know that in 3 days, I'd discover exactly how deep Alaric's world went, how dark the shadows were that he kept Sophia sheltered from. All I knew was that tomorrow, I'd be back in that kitchen, and the day after that, and the day after that, because Sophia deserved to learn, and somewhere in the tangle of my own protective instincts, I'd already decided I was the one who would teach her. The danger in that decision wouldn't become clear until it was far too late to walk away. The first 2 weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. I'd arrive at the Marchetti brownstone at 11, spend 3 hours with Sophia in the kitchen, then leave in time for my night shift at Rosetti's. We progressed from cookies to simple pasta dishes, from measuring by feel to recognizing doneness by smell and touch. Sophia was a natural, her other senses sharp enough to compensate beautifully for her blindness. Alaric was always there, watching from his position against the counter or at the kitchen table, his laptop open, but his attention clearly on us. He rarely spoke during our lessons, but I'd grown attuned to his presence, the slight shift in posture when Sophia did something that concerned him, the barely perceptible relaxation when she succeeded at a new skill. What I hadn't anticipated was how much I'd start to notice him. The way his dress shirts fit across his shoulders, always with those top buttons undone, revealing the hollow of his throat. The silver watch he wore that caught the light when he moved. The rare moments when Sophia made him laugh, a sound that transformed his entire face from severe to almost gentle. I told myself it was just observation, the same way I noticed regulars at the restaurant, their habits, preferences, moods. But I couldn't ignore the flutter in my chest when his eyes met mine across the kitchen, or the way my pulse quickened when his hand accidentally brushed mine reaching for the same spoon. It was the third Wednesday when everything shifted. I'd just finished showing Sophia how to knead bread dough, our hands working together in the rhythmic push and fold motion, when Alaric's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and something in his expression went cold. "Anna," he called, his tone sharp, "take Sophia upstairs. Now." "But Papa, we're not done. Now, Sophia." The command in his voice left no room for argument. Anna appeared immediately, as if she'd been waiting for this exact scenario, and guided Sophia from the kitchen. I started to gather my things, assuming I was being dismissed too. "You stay." Alaric's voice stopped me. He answered the phone, turning away. "I told you not to call this number. I don't care what Dimitri thinks. No, we're not discussing this now." He ended the call abruptly, his knuckles white where he gripped the phone. For a long moment he stood with his back to me, and I watched the tension coil through his shoulders. "I should go," I said quietly. "Give you privacy." "No." He turned to face me, and the expression on his face made me take an involuntary step back. This wasn't the carefully controlled man I'd grown used to. This was something rawer, more dangerous. "We need to talk about what you've seen here." My pulse jumped. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't insult my intelligence, Mia." He moved toward me, each step deliberate. "You're observant. I've watched you catalog every detail of this house, every person who comes and goes. You've noticed the security, the cameras, the way certain visitors arrive and leave through the back entrance. I had noticed, had tried not to, had told myself it wasn't my business. But yes, I'd seen the men in expensive suits who arrived at odd hours, who spoke to Alaric in voices too low to hear. I'd seen the tension that sometimes filled the house like electricity before a storm. "I notice things," I admitted. "It's a habit from work, but I don't ask questions, because you're smart enough to know that questions can be dangerous." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. Or because you already know the answers, and you're smart enough to pretend ignorance. "I don't know anything," I said, and it was mostly true. I had suspicions. The kind of suspicions everyone in Chicago had about certain families, certain names that carried weight beyond simple business success. But suspicions weren't knowledge. Alaric studied me for a long moment, those gray eyes searching for deception. "My family has been in Chicago for 4 generations," he said finally. "We have varied business interests. Some of them fall into gray areas. Some of them crossed lines that the law draws very clearly. There it was, the admission I'd half expected but had hoped I was wrong about. "Why are you telling me this?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Because Sophia has never connected with anyone the way she's connected with you. Because in 2 weeks, you've given her more confidence than years of expensive therapists and specialists. Because I'm not willing to give that up." He paused. "But I need to know if you can handle the reality of who I am." I thought about the cookies cooling on the rack, about Sophia's joy when she'd made pasta from scratch yesterday. I thought about my studio apartment, about the bruise on my ribs from when a drunk customer had shoved me last week at the restaurant. I thought about safety and danger, and how those concepts were more complicated than I'd ever wanted to admit. "I can handle it," I said, "as long as Sophia stays separate from whatever else you do." Something flickered in his expression, respect, maybe, or surprise. "She's always separate. My work never touches her. That's not negotiable." "Then we don't have a problem." He nodded slowly. "Your compensation. We haven't discussed it properly. I'm prepared to offer you significantly more than what you make at Rossetti's. Enough that you wouldn't need the restaurant job anymore." The offer was tempting. God, it was tempting. To give up the aching feet, the handsy customers, the constant smell of garlic in my hair. But something in his tone made me hesitate. In exchange for what? Exclusivity. You work for me, teach Sophia, nothing else. His gaze was direct, unflinching. And discretion. Complete discretion about everything you see and hear in this house. The gilded cage became visible in his words. Well compensated, certainly. Comfortable. But still a cage. "No," I said. His eyebrows rose fractionally. "No? I'll keep teaching Sophia. I'll be discreet about your business. But I'm not giving up my other job. I'm not becoming dependent on you." For a long moment, he just looked at me, and I braced myself for anger. Instead, his lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "You're more stubborn than you look. I'm practical. Dependence is its own kind of trap." "Smart," he acknowledged. "But understand this. If you continue working at Rossetti's, I'll have someone watching. For your protection." "I don't need protection. You're connected to me now. Whether you like it or not, that makes you a potential target." His voice dropped lower. "There are people who would love to hurt me through Sophia, who would happily use anyone connected to her. I'm not willing to take that risk." The reality of what he was saying settled over me like ice water. This was a mistake. I should never have agreed to. Too late. He cut me off. "Sophia cares about you. I'm not taking that away from her. So you have 2 choices. Accept my protection, or stop coming here entirely." I stared at him, anger and fear warring in my chest. That's not fair to her. Fair has nothing to do with it. This is about safety, hers and yours. I thought about Sophia's face when she'd successfully made bread dough, about the pride in her voice when she talked about the birthday cake she was planning for Alaric. Thought about walking away from that. From her. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth. "But your person stays invisible. I don't want to know they're there." "Agreed." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "There's something else you should know." "What?" "Sophia's mother. She died when Sophia was 2. Car accident." His voice remained level, but I caught the tightness around his eyes. The brakes had been tampered with. It was meant for me. The air left my lungs. Oh, God. "So you understand now why I'm paranoid about her safety? Why I don't let people get close?" He met my eyes. "Why I'm taking a risk letting you into her life at all? I would never—" "I know," he interrupted. "I've had you investigated thoroughly. Every job you've ever had, every friend, every relationship. You're clean. More than clean. You're exactly what you appear to be. That's rare in my world. The invasion of privacy should have angered me. Instead, I felt a strange relief that he'd looked and found nothing to hide. What was her name? I asked. Sophia's mother. Elena. Something softened in his expression. She was a teacher. Kind, patient, everything I'm not. Sophia has her eyes, her smile. I'm sorry. He nodded once, accepting the condolence. It's been 6 years, but I promised Elena I'd keep Sophia safe. That promise is the only thing that matters. I understand. We stood there in the kitchen, the bread dough rising on the counter between us, and something shifted. An acknowledgement of the stakes, of the reality underneath the cooking lessons, and careful politeness. Your birthday is next month, I said, remembering what Sophia had told me that first night. December 23rd. You remember that? Sophia wants to make you a cake, chocolate with salted caramel frosting. She's been practicing the components separately. His expression did something complicated. Surprise and pleasure and something that looked almost like pain. She told you that? Weeks ago. It's why she wanted to learn in the first place. Alaric was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was rougher. I haven't had a birthday cake since Elena died. Haven't celebrated at all. Maybe it's time to start again. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. You're dangerous, Mia Chen. How? You make me want things I gave up wanting years ago. He said it quietly, almost to himself. That's more dangerous than any rival. Before I could respond, Sophia's voice called from upstairs. Papa, can Mia come up? I want to show her my room. The moment broke. Alaric stepped back, the professional mask sliding back into place. Go ahead. I have calls to make. I found Sophia waiting at the top of the stairs, practically vibrating with excitement. Her room was beautiful, organized perfectly for someone navigating by touch and memory, with textures and scents marking different areas. She showed me everything, explaining her system with the pride of someone who'd fought hard for independence. But as she talked about her books in Braille, her music collection, her clothes organized by fabric type, I kept thinking about Alaric's words downstairs. You make me want things I gave up wanting years ago. What did that mean? What did he want? I didn't have answers. But as I left that afternoon, as I noticed the black sedan that began following me at a discreet distance, I realized that whatever was happening between Alaric and me, it was bigger than just teaching Sophia to cook. It was connection. Dangerous, complicated connection with a man who lived in shadows and violence, but who looked at his daughter with such fierce love it made my chest ache. I told myself to be careful, to maintain boundaries, to remember that this was just a job. But when I pulled out my phone that night after my shift at Rosetti's and found a text from Alaric, thank you for today. For all of it. I knew I was already in deeper than was safe. I just didn't know how deep until it was too late to find my way back out. 6 months changed everything in ways I couldn't have predicted that first night in the alley. Sophia progressed from basic cookies to complex dishes. Coq au vin she prepared entirely by touch and smell. A Christmas roast she'd brined herself. Desserts that required precision timing she'd learned to judge by temperature and texture. My afternoons at the Marchetti Brownstone became the part of my day I looked forward to most, and I stopped pretending it was just about Sophia. Alaric was always there, watching, but his presence had evolved from surveillance to something else. We talked now, during Sophia's breaks or while things baked. Small conversations at first, books we'd read, restaurants I'd worked at that he'd invested in without knowing I was there, memories of Chicago in different seasons. Then deeper things, his childhood in a family where violence was currency, my father's slow death from cancer, the weight of protecting people you loved. He never touched me, but sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with an expression that made my breath stop. And sometimes, when I laughed at something Sophia said, I'd glance up to find him smiling at me instead of his daughter, as if my joy was its own reward. I'd started to crave those moments like air. It was a Tuesday in late February when the careful balance shattered. I arrived at 11 as usual, but Alaric met me at the door instead of Anna, his face a mask of cold fury. "Sophia's at a doctor's appointment," he said without preamble. "We need to talk, in my study." The walk down the familiar hallway felt different now, charged with tension I didn't understand. Once the door closed behind us, Alaric moved to the window, his back to me, shoulders rigid. "There's a situation," he said finally. "Someone's been asking questions about you, about your connection to Sophia, to me." Ice slid through my veins. "What kind of questions?" "Your schedule, where you live, whether you're just a teacher or something more." He turned to face me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his expression, genuine fear. "A rival family. They're looking for leverage against me." "I'm not leverage," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a lie. 6 months of afternoons, of growing closeness, of Alaric's eyes following me across rooms. I'd become exactly what he'd warned me about. "You are now." He crossed to his desk, pulled out a folder and slid it toward me. "I'm moving you. Tonight. There's an apartment in a secure building downtown. 24-hour security, everything you need." I stared at the folder without touching it. "You want me to leave my home? I want you alive." His voice was flat, brooking no argument. "Your building has no security. Your door lock could be picked by a child. You work late shifts and walk 3 blocks alone in the dark. You're an easy target, Mia. So, your solution is to lock me in a fortress?" Anger rose hot in my chest. "Make me dependent on you, controlled by you?" "My solution is to keep you safe." He leaned forward, hands flat on the desk. "I lost Elena because I underestimated how far my enemies would go. I'm not making that mistake again." The comparison to his dead wife should have flattered me. Instead, it terrified me. "I'm not Elena," I said quietly. "I'm not your wife, not your responsibility. I'm just someone who teaches your daughter to cook." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "You stopped being just anything months ago." The admission hung between us, naked and raw. I wanted to deny it, to maintain the safe fiction that this was just a job, but I couldn't. "What am I then?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He moved around the desk, and suddenly he was close. So close I could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes, smell the cedar and bergamot that clung to his skin. "You're the woman who taught my daughter to laugh again, who sits at my table 3 afternoons a week and makes this house feel like a home instead of a mausoleum, who looks at me like I'm a man instead of a monster, even though you know exactly what I am." His hand lifted, hovering near my face without touching. "You're the most dangerous thing that's happened to me in years." My breath caught. "Alaric. I'm moving you, Mia. You can go willingly, or I can have my men pack your things for you. But you're not staying in that death trap you call an apartment one more night." The arrogance should have infuriated me. Instead, I found myself asking, "And if I refuse? If I just walk away from all of this?" His jaw tightened. "Then I'll have someone watching you every moment for the rest of your life, because I can't—" He broke off, and when he continued, his voice was strained. "I can't lose you too. I won't." The raw honesty in his words undid something in me. I thought about my apartment, about the leak in the ceiling I'd been reporting for months, about the night last week when I'd heard gunshots on the next block. I thought about safety and freedom, and how those things balanced against Sophia's face when she'd made her first perfect soufflé. "Okay," I said, "but I keep working at Rossetti's, and I pay rent on the new place." "Mia, those are my terms," I interrupted. "I won't be a kept woman, Alaric. I won't be owned." He studied me for a long moment, and I watched him calculate, weigh options. Finally, he nodded. "You keep Rossetti's, but the apartment is free. Consider it part of your compensation for Sophia's lessons." "Half rent," I countered. "Whatever the market rate is, I pay half." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Stubborn. Practical. Fine. Half rent." He extended his hand. "Deal?" I looked at his hand, at the offer it represented. Safety, yes, but also entanglement. Deeper involvement with a man whose world was violence and secrets. A man I was dangerously close to caring about. I shook his hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and held for a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for trusting me." "I'm not sure I do," I admitted. "But I trust that you'll protect Sophia, and apparently that includes protecting me now too. Always." The word was a promise and a warning. That night, Alaric's men moved my meager belongings to the new apartment while I worked at Rossetti's. When my shift ended at midnight, a car was waiting. Not the black sedan I'd grown used to seeing, but Alaric himself behind the wheel. "I thought you didn't drive," I said, sliding into the passenger seat of what was probably a car worth more than I'd make in 5 years. "Special occasions only." He pulled into traffic with practiced ease. "Wanted to show you the new place myself." The building was in River North, all glass and steel and doormen in actual uniforms. The apartment on the 15th floor was bigger than anywhere I'd ever lived. 1 bedroom, a real kitchen, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. My boxes sat in the living room, looking lost in all that space. "It's too much," I said, overwhelmed. "It's safe." He moved to the window, looking out at Chicago spread beneath us. "The building has excellent security. You'll have a key card that tracks entry and exit. There's a gym on the 2nd floor, a grocery store on the ground level." "A gilded cage," I said, but without real heat. He turned to face me. "A safe haven. There's a difference." Maybe there was, or maybe I was just too tired to fight anymore, too worn down by years of struggling alone to reject help when it was offered. "Sophia's birthday is next month," I said, changing the subject. "She wants to make tiramisu for her party." His expression softened. "She told me. Asked if you could come, not just to help cook, but as a guest. And I want you there." He moved closer, and I could feel the pull between us like gravity. Not as the hired help, as someone who matters to her, to us. The us did something to my chest, made it hard to breathe. "Alaric, I don't know if this is—" "Don't." He cut me off gently. "Don't analyze it tonight. Just say you'll come to her party." I should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries that were already far too blurred. But I looked at this man who'd moved me to safety without asking anything in return, except my presence at his daughter's birthday, and I couldn't refuse. "I'll come." His smile transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. "Good." He left shortly after, and I stood in my new apartment surrounded by boxes, feeling the ground shift beneath me. I'd agreed to move into his world, to accept his protection, to become part of his and Sophia's life in ways that went beyond simple employment. I told myself I could still maintain distance, still keep my heart separate even as my life tangled with theirs. But when I found the envelope on the kitchen counter, cash for the first month's half rent that was clearly more than half of any reasonable market rate, I realized Alaric was already taking care of me whether I admitted it or not. I was falling for a man whose hands were stained with violence, whose world was built on fear and power. A man who looked at me like I was precious, who protected what he cared about with ruthless efficiency. I should have been terrified. Part of me was. But a larger part was already wondering what it would be like to be truly his. Not just the teacher who came 3 afternoons a week, but something more. Something permanent. That night, I unpacked my boxes and tried not to think about how easily I'd surrendered to Alaric's care, how much I wanted to surrender more. The danger wasn't just from his enemies anymore. It was from how badly I wanted to stay in the sanctuary he'd built around me, even knowing the price of that safety might be my independence. But for tonight, in this beautiful apartment with the city glowing beneath me, I let myself feel safe for the first time in years. Tomorrow I could worry about the cost. Sophia's 9th birthday party was small, but perfect. Just her, Alaric, Anna, and me in the Marchetti dining room with the tiramisu we'd made together the day before. She'd done most of the work herself, her fingers steady as they layered espresso-soaked ladyfingers and mascarpone cream, her confidence a world away from the uncertain girl I'd met 6 months ago. "Make a wish, Piccola," Alaric said softly, as Sophia leaned toward the candles, their glow reflected in her unseeing eyes. She closed her eyes anyway, lips moving in silent wish, then blew out all 9 flames in one breath. The way Alaric looked at her in that moment, fierce pride mixed with an aching tenderness, made my throat tight. "What did you wish for?" I asked. Sophia smiled, mysterious. "I can't tell, or it won't come true, but it's something I want very much." After cake, after Anna cleared the dishes and retired for the evening, Alaric suggested we move to the library. Sophia curled up in the leather armchair by the fireplace with a braille book, while Alaric poured himself scotch and offered me wine. I declined. I had an early shift at Rosetti's the next morning. "I got you something," Sophia said suddenly, setting down her book. "Both of you, actually. It's not wrapped because, well..." She gestured at her eyes with a self-deprecating smile that was pure Alaric. She produced a small wooden box from beside her chair, running her fingers over it before handing it to her father. "For you, Papa." Inside were cookies, chocolate chip, the recipe she'd learned first, each one perfectly shaped. But these had been decorated with icing in careful letters that spelled out, "Ti amo, Papa." "Sophia." Alaric's voice was rough. "When did you learn to ice letters?" "Mia taught me last week. I practiced every day." She bit her lip. "Are they okay? Did I get the letters right?" "They're perfect." He set the box down carefully and pulled Sophia into a hug that looked like it hurt, like he was holding on against a current trying to tear them apart. "Thank you, Piccola. I love you too." When he finally released her, Sophia turned in my direction. "And for you, Mia. It's not food this time." She handed me a smaller box. Inside was a bracelet. Simple silver chain with a single charm, a tiny whisk. "Anna helped me order it online," Sophia explained. "Because you taught me that cooking is about more than following recipes. It's about trusting yourself to create something from nothing. That's what you gave me. Confidence." I blinked back tears, slipping the bracelet onto my wrist. "Sophia, I don't know what to say. It's beautiful. Say you'll keep teaching me, that you'll keep coming here, even though I'm getting better and might not need lessons much longer." The fear underneath her words was palpable, that I was only here because she needed me, that once she was competent, I'd disappear. "I'm not going anywhere," I promised, ignoring the way Alaric's gaze intensified on me. "You're stuck with me, kiddo." Sophia's smile was radiant. "Good, because I already told Papa you should come on vacation with us this summer. He's renting a house in Lake Como, and there's a cooking school nearby I want to attend, and I want you to come with me and..." "Sophia," Alaric interrupted gently. "Slow down. Mia might have other plans. But when I looked at him, I saw hope in his expression, carefully controlled but unmistakable. He wanted me there, wanted me part of their summer, their life, their family. I'd love to, I heard myself say. If you're sure. I'm sure, Sophia said firmly. Aren't we, Papa? Very sure. Alaric's eyes never left mine. After Sophia went to bed, Alaric walked me to the door as he always did. But tonight, instead of just saying goodnight, he caught my wrist gently, his thumb brushing over the new bracelet. She loves you, he said quietly. You know that, don't you? I love her too. Just her? The question was soft, weighted with something that made my pulse jump. I should have deflected, should have maintained the careful distance I'd been clinging to. But standing there in the quiet of his home, his fingers warm on my wrist, I couldn't lie. No, I admitted. Not just her. His breath caught, and for a moment we stood frozen, the truth hanging between us. Then his phone rang, harsh, insistent, shattering the moment. He checked the screen and his expression went cold. I have to take this, he answered, his voice shifting to the clipped, dangerous tone I'd learned meant business. What? When? How many men do they have? I moved toward the door, giving him privacy, but he caught my arm. Wait. Don't leave yet. The call lasted 3 minutes, each second tightening the tension in Alaric's shoulders. When he finally ended it, he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, raw fear barely contained. What's wrong? I asked. Dimitri's organization. They've escalated. He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect styling. There's going to be a response, and it's going to be public. Visible. I need you to stay away from the brownstone for a few days. What about Sophia? Sophia stays here with double security. But you... He gripped my shoulders, his fingers tight enough to leave marks. You need to be careful. Don't deviate from your routine. Don't go anywhere alone. The men I have watching you will stay close. But Mia, if anything feels wrong, you call me immediately. The fear in his voice frightened me more than the words. Alaric, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. His hands moved to frame my face, tilting it up to meet his eyes. I've made enemies, Mia. Dangerous ones. And they know you matter to me now. That makes you a target. Then maybe I should... No. He cut me off. Don't even think about walking away. We're past that now. His thumbs stroked my cheekbones, gentle despite the steel in his voice. You're mine to protect now, whether you like it or not. The possessiveness should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent heat through my veins, made me lean into his touch. I'm not yours, I whispered, but even I could hear how unconvincing it sounded. Liar. His voice was soft, almost tender. You've been mine since that first night when you brought Sophia home. I was just too stubborn to admit it. Before I could respond, his phone rang again. He released me with visible reluctance, and I slipped out into the night where his car and driver waited to take me home. The next 3 days were tense. I went to work at Rossetti's, hyper-aware of the security Alaric had promised. I caught glimpses of them, men in suits positioned at the bar, at tables with sightlines to wherever I was working. At home in my apartment, I found myself checking the locks obsessively, jumping at every sound. On the 4th day, everything changed. I was walking to the bus stop after my shift, the security I'd grown accustomed to nowhere visible. A black van pulled up beside me, and before I could scream, hands grabbed me, a cloth pressed over my mouth smelling of chemicals and darkness. I fought, panic giving me strength I didn't know I had. But there were too many hands, too strong. and the chemical sweetness was making my limbs heavy, my vision blurring. The last thing I heard before the world went black was a voice, accented and cold. "Marchetti wants her back. He knows where to find us. Let's see how much she's really worth to him." I woke to concrete beneath my cheek, cold and gritty against my skin. My head pounded, mouth dry with the chemical taste of whatever they'd used to knock me out. As consciousness returned in painful increments, I became aware of other things. My hands zip-tied behind my back, the damp chill of wherever I was being held, the low murmur of voices speaking Russian somewhere beyond my vision. I forced myself still, keeping my breathing steady while I tried to assess my situation through the other senses Sophia had taught me to rely on. The smell of oil and rust, the echo that suggested a large, empty space, the vibration of heavy machinery somewhere nearby. A warehouse, probably near the river if the damp mildew scent meant anything. She's awake. Footsteps approached, and I opened my eyes to find a man crouching in front of me. Mid-40s, expensive suit incongruous with the industrial setting, eyes as cold as Lake Michigan in January. "Miss Chen." His English was perfect, only the faintest accent coloring his vowels. "I apologize for the accommodations. This is purely business, you understand." I said nothing, using silence the way I'd learned working in restaurants. Let the customer talk, reveal what they wanted before committing to a response. He smiled as if appreciating the tactic. "I am Viktor Dmitriev. Perhaps Alaric has mentioned me?" The name clicked into place. The rival Alaric had mentioned, the escalating situation that had put him on edge. "He's never mentioned you," I said, my voice rougher than expected. "I'm just the cooking teacher. I don't know anything about his business." "Just the cooking teacher," Victor repeated, his tone making it clear he didn't believe me. "Who lives in a secure apartment that Marchetti pays for. Who has armed guards following her every movement. Who his daughter loves like a mother." Each observation was a knife, showing me exactly how thoroughly they'd been watching. "Sophia has no mother," I said, protective fury overriding fear. "I'm just someone who teaches her to cook." "Then why did Marchetti move you to a fortress the moment we started asking questions?" Victor leaned closer. "Why did he assign his best men to your protection? A man like Alaric doesn't waste resources on people who don't matter." I had no answer that wouldn't confirm his suspicions. "Here's what's going to happen," Victor continued, pulling out his phone. "I'm going to call Alaric. I'm going to tell him we have you. And we're going to see exactly how much you're worth to him." He pressed dial, putting the phone on speaker. It rang twice before Alaric's voice cut through, sharp with barely controlled fury. "Victor." "Alaric, how good to hear from you. I have something of yours." The pause that followed was deadly. When Alaric spoke again, his voice was so cold it made the warehouse feel warm by comparison. "If you've heard her, she's perfectly safe, for now." Victor grabbed my hair, yanking my head back. "Say hello to Alaric, Miss Chen." "Don't give him anything," I gasped out before Victor's hand clamped over my mouth. "Don't." "Mia." Alaric's voice cracked on my name, and I heard something I'd never heard before. Pure terror underneath the rage. "I'm going to kill you, Victor. Slowly. Perhaps. But first, we negotiate." Victor released me, letting my head drop forward. "I want the shipping contracts for the Eastern District. I want your contacts in the Port Authority. I want—" "You want me to hand over my entire operation for one woman?" Alaric laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You overestimate her value." The words shouldn't have hurt. I knew he was playing, knew he couldn't show weakness, but hearing myself dismissed as not worth his empire still sent a shard of ice through my chest. "Do I?" Victor sounded amused. "I saw the security footage from her building, the way you carried her boxes yourself, the way you looked at her when you thought no one was watching. He paused. Shall I test how little she's worth? My men are quite creative. Touch her, and there won't be enough left of you to bury. Alaric's voice was absolutely calm now, which somehow made the threat more terrifying. Here's my counteroffer. You let her go, unharmed, and I'll give you 3 hours to get out of Chicago before I burn your organization to the ground. Victor laughed. 3 hours? I think not. Here's what's actually going to happen. The explosion that rocked the warehouse cut him off. Victor spun toward the sound, barking orders in Russian. More explosions followed. Systematic, controlled, closing in from multiple directions. Victor looked at his phone, at me, and I saw the moment he realized his miscalculation. He's insane. The main door blew inward, and through the smoke and chaos, I saw Alaric stride through, flanked by a dozen armed men. He wasn't wearing his usual tailored suit. He was in black tactical gear, a gun in each hand, his expression the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. I told you what I'd do if you hurt her, he said, his voice carrying across the warehouse. What followed was brutal and efficient. Victor's men tried to fight, but they were outmatched, outgunned, outmaneuvered. Through it all, Alaric moved toward me with single-minded focus, shooting anyone who got in his way. When he finally reached me, he dropped to his knees, his hands shaking as they checked me for injuries. Mia, look at me. Are you hurt? I'm okay, I managed. Scared, but okay. He cut the zip ties with a knife that appeared from somewhere, then pulled me against his chest so hard I couldn't breathe. I felt him trembling, felt the thundering of his heart against my cheek. I thought I lost you, he whispered into my hair. I thought I was too late. Around us, his men were securing the warehouse, dealing with Victor, who was being dragged away, bleeding but alive. I should have been traumatized, should have been horrified by the violence. But all I could focus on was Alaric's arms around me, the fierce protective grip that said I was precious, valuable, worth burning down the world to recover. You came for me, I said unnecessarily. Always. He pulled back just enough to frame my face with his hands, and I saw his eyes were wet. I will always come for you. Always protect you. Because you're not just Sophia's teacher, Mia. You're... He stopped, seeming to search for words. I'm what? Everything. The word was raw, honest, stripped of all his usual control. You're everything to me. Then he kissed me, there in the wreckage of the warehouse, with his men securing the perimeter, and Victor's blood staining the concrete. It was desperate and claiming and tender all at once, his hands cradling my face like I was something infinitely fragile, despite the violence surrounding us. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Marry me. I laughed, the sound edging toward hysteria. We've never even been on a date. I don't need dates. I need you, safe, with me, where I can protect you properly. His thumbs stroked my cheekbones. Marry me, Mia. Be my wife. Be Sophia's mother. Be mine in every way that matters. That's not a proposal. That's a command. Then here's the proposal. He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. I love you. I've loved you since you walked my daughter home and didn't ask for anything in return. I love that you're stubborn and independent and refuse to let me just take care of you. I love watching you teach Sophia, watching you bring life into my house. I love you, and I'm asking, begging, you to marry me. The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over. You really want to marry the cooking teacher? I want to marry the woman who sees me as a man instead of a monster, who loves my daughter, who makes me want to be better than what I am. He kissed me again, softer this time. Say yes. I thought about all the reasons this was insane, the violence, the danger, the world he lived in that I'd just been dragged into. I thought about my studio apartment I'd left behind, about the independence I'd fought so hard to maintain. Then I thought about Sophia's laugh, about Alaric's rare smiles, about the way they'd both become home to me without me even noticing. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." His smile was incandescent, transforming his entire face. "Thank God." He scooped me up, carrying me through the warehouse toward the waiting cars outside. Behind us, I heard his men finishing their work, dismantling Victor's operation with the same efficiency they'd used to rescue me. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now I take you home, to Sophia, who's probably driven Anna insane with worry. Tomorrow we make this official, ring, announcement, all of it." He looked down at me, his expression softening. "And then we start planning a wedding, unless you want to just elope." "Sophia would kill us both if we eloped." "Fair point." We reached the car, and he settled me carefully in the back seat before sliding in beside me. "Then a wedding it is, whatever you want." As the car pulled away from the warehouse, as Chicago blurred past the windows, I leaned into Alaric's warmth and let myself imagine it. A future with him and Sophia. Dangerous, yes, but also full of the love I'd been missing since my father died. "I want Sophia to help plan it," I said, "and I want to make our wedding cake together." Alaric's arm tightened around me. Perfect. 3 years later, I stood in the kitchen of Primavera, the inclusive restaurant Alaric and I had opened together, where Sophia now worked several afternoons a week teaching cooking classes to other blind kids. He'd stepped back from most of the illegal operations after Victor, focusing instead on the legitimate businesses that had always been there, waiting for him to choose a different path. We weren't perfect. His world still had shadows, still required security and caution. But we were happy. "Mia," Sophia called from the prep area. "The mixer's making that sound again." I moved to help her, still wearing the simple silver whisk bracelet she'd given me 4 years ago. My wedding ring, a band that matched Alaric's, sat above it, catching the kitchen lights. Alaric appeared in the doorway, paperwork in hand, but his eyes immediately finding me and Sophia. He'd kept his promise. Whatever darkness remained in his life, he kept it separate from us. We were his light, his redemption, the family he'd built from the ruins of loss. "Still planning the menu for the second location opening?" I asked. "Sophia has opinions," he said dryly. "Strong ones." "I learned from the best," Sophia shot back, not looking up from the dough she was kneading. At 12, she'd grown confident and capable. The frightened girl who'd waited in the alley, now a poised young woman who happened to be blind but refused to let that define her. I crossed to Alaric, rising on my toes to kiss him. He pulled me closer, the embrace familiar and perfect. "Thank you," he murmured against my hair. "For what?" "For saying yes. For staying. For giving me this." He gestured to encompass the kitchen, Sophia, the life we'd built. "For being everything." I looked at my husband, at his daughter who'd become mine in every way that mattered, at the restaurant we'd created together. Thought about the scared waitress I'd been, teaching a blind girl to make cookies in a mafia boss's kitchen. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters led to the most extraordinary futures. "I'd say yes again," I told him. "Every time. And I would. Despite the danger, despite the fear, despite everything. Because some risks were worth taking. Some families were worth fighting for, and some loves were worth everything.